Welcome to episode 26 of Why Not Read Alpha Flight with Chris and Tom, a podcast where we take your favorite series seriously. I'm Chris Baker.
And I'm Tom Flynn. We're recording this episode just a couple days after a great weekend spent at C2E2. I know we mentioned it in the episode that went up the Monday after that fantastic event, and I'm still kind of buzzing about it, which is really great considering the freaking issue we're about to talk about.
My feet are still hurting from it, I can tell you that much.
You know, my feet never really hurt that much, but I'm bone tired. Like, my bones are tired. It's kind of absurd, quite frankly, but
cons are a young person's game. Yes. Well, we only have one issue for you today, folks, and yes, it's that issue. I hope you can hear the capitals. So without further ado, the story so far. In the wake of the death of team leader James McDonald Hudson, aka Guardian, the members of Alpha Flight voted to have his widow, the totally human Heather Hudson, take over as team leader. Since taking over, Heather has guided the team through numerous difficult situations, and most of them ended up alive at the end of every issue, so she seems to be doing a pretty good job. Notable exception to this is founding Alpha's secret agent linebacker superhero Dr. Walter Lankowski, aka Sasquatch, who was killed by fellow founding Alphan Snowbird, aka Narya, for totally justifiable reasons, but not the reasons Tom wanted.
Hey, I'll take what I can get, and am I ever happy with what I got? Our lineup now includes Speedster twins Northstar and Aurora, Hirsute acrobatic dwarf, and a unitard Puck. Man, I'm glad I didn't wear a unitard. And newcomers Roger Box in his box with an X armor and techno-transmutator Mr. Madison Jeffries. Having barely survived an encounter with Jeffries' brother, the now stable Scramble, that makes so much more sense if you just listened to 2 episodes ago, and a subsequent encounter with a revived Deadly Ernest, conveniently reassembled by the aforementioned Scramble. You know, guys, we're like 3 issues into Mantlo, and the continuity is already getting really, really complicated. Having survived those 2 encounters barely, Heather's confidence is at an all-time low.
In that fight with Ernest, Puck was forced to wield an ill-explained power sword.
Warhammer 40k is here, baby!
Not that kind of power sword, Tom.
Son of a...
Back to the story at hand, not the story Tom seems to want. Puck's interaction with Nemesis' sword seems to cause him greater pain than makes sense, the cause of which we discover in this issue, and yeah, it's that issue. So without further ado,
Alpha Flight number 32, cover date March 1986, titled Short Story.
Boo. Writer is Bill Mantlo, penciler is John Bogdanoff, inker is Jerry Taliok, letterer is Jim Novak, colorist is Bob Sharon, editor is Carl Potts, and Jim Shooter as editor-in-chief.
The cover has a very striking hot pink outline to the Alpha Flight logo and is mostly a pink and blue cloud that takes the shape of a giant figure in a turban holding a scimitar in one hand and Puck in the other. Box, Northstar, and Aurora seem to be fighting the cloud, and a text box says, featuring the new Vindicator. And, as teased last issue, we have the totally human Heather Hudson in the classic, though I guess fresh and new back then, Vindicator suit, but with a snazzy red visor because, as we all know, Heather is passionate about eyewear.
This cover is signed by Mignola, and the lack of eyes on anyone should have told me that before I got to the signature.
I mean, Heather should be glad she even has eyewear with Mignola's apparent disregard for eyes.
That was mean, Tom.
I know, I love you, Mike, but it was there. Full page splash intro. We hit the ground running with Heather wearing the Vindicator suit, standing in the doorway in almost a come Heather pose.
Oh, yeah.
It's weird,
There's
right?
a lot of Heather butt.
Saying, I'm here, Puck, and ready to begin my battle training.
And Puck recoiling in horror saying, no!
Heather says, is something wrong, Puck? I told you I was feeling woefully inadequate as Alpha's leader without any combat training or superpowers to call my own. So I went out and found power. A Guardian battlesuit just like that worn by Mac. Now I want you to supply the training.
Puck thinks, after briefly knowing what it meant to possess power during our encounter with the X-Men, and after the way she's been victimized lately by her enemies Scramble and Deadly Ernest, I should have foreseen that Heather might seize any chance to make herself equal in might to those she is supposed to lead. That is really heavy-handed, but clear as day. It is obviously aimed at a different kind of reader than Byrne was after. It seemed Byrne was bringing in the hip crowd who follow him for his flair, while Mantlo is writing a workaday superhero team comic book for kids to pick up every month. And that's fine. It's just not as good as what Byrne made. However, I read these as a kid. I didn't really understand what was going on. I just knew this was the story of the characters. So in the spirit of taking this seriously, here we go.
Obviously there's a pretty massive tonal shift here, but I think the bigger issue that we're both having is that the reasoning and the way that it's developing seems both rushed and poorly thought out. There's a discussion that follows because we're not going to just reread the entire comic. No one wants that.
It started off with a lot of quote here because that's just how it's done. There's no other way to boil it down.
Heather and Puck proceed to have a discussion as to whether it was the suit or Mac's lack of combat sense that got him killed. And to be fair, I think it's a little column A, column B. It's also interesting because a lot of the folks that are part of Alpha Flight, a lot of the heroes, they didn't really get training. I mean, we get some montages or suggestion of a montage of Puck training Talisman, but that's after she got her powers. And there is the scene where they, in issue 2, where they were out in the field, practicing some movements or whatever, just for team dynamics, but it's not like anyone gets put through the ringer on a regular basis the way that, say, the X-Men do.
This scene is taking place inside Alpha Flight's new base on Tamarind Island, British Columbia, which is equipped with an old-fashioned, non-holographic danger room for them to train in. The narration box even calls it their danger room. It feels cheap to me to reuse the X-Men's training room name. It's less personable. It'll have a different name in Volume 2. But one thing that we haven't seen Alpha Flight do since like issue 5 or something is train as a team to try to do anything together with tactics. And JMH was very much trying to get that to be like, all right, yeah, you guys know how to punch and how to take a punch. That's fine. But we need to know how to do this together. And that's something we haven't seen yet. And even now, it's always being discussed as combat training. It's about Puck teaching other people how to fight with their fists instead of learning how to develop their powers. And that singular focus on brawling is what separates this, I think, from the X-Men. It's still about the individuals. It's not about the team, even though he's writing this as a team book and not about individuals. And I think that's where the gear grinding is kind of happening, is that he doesn't know if it's a team book or if it's an individual book.
Maybe a finer way of putting it, or a finer point to it, is he's trying to write a team book that is full of individuals. I mean, to date, every time Alpha has faced a threat strong enough that they all have to contribute, there's usually a singular solution to the problem. If it's a mystical thing, Shaman needs to step in. If it's powerful enough, then like Sasquatch needs to beat it down hard enough that then something else can be done.
That then Shaman can take care of it.
Exactly. It's been a lot of that. So I guess I can say that maybe this is just early days and this is part of the process of shifting the book into something a little bit different. That's reasonable. It kind of pains me to see Heather making these arguments. It pains me to see a lot of these characters make these arguments out of a kind of self-loathing that wasn't really there before.
There was concern, but it wasn't about self-loathing. It was a valid worry about, am I good enough to do this job?
Right. And in Byrne's run, a lot of Heather's concerns stem from, frankly, PTSD from watching her husband explode in front of her and from grief.
And then being ripped apart by a monster.
All of these things, right? But she didn't think of herself as less. She was just in a really tough position.
However, a natural consequence of those experiences could well develop into this type of response. And so I'm not writing off the response entirely. I just don't like it. That's all. Because I don't like seeing my friends hate themselves, I don't
like it, and I don't feel like it's particularly earned yet. So that's also part of it for me.
And I am more forgiving on that earned part. I think it is earned. It's just not a interesting angle, except that self-loathing angle, we've got it here for Heather, we got it here for Puck, we got it here for Box, is very much how Mantlo is conceiving of this. Have you known people who don't like themselves, Tom?
Yeah, it occurred to me as you said that maybe that's why he doesn't have as much for Northstar at the moment, because Northstar doesn't hate himself.
Northstar hates everybody else.
He hates everybody else.
He's perfect.
So I don't know that Mantlo really knows how to write for that or is interested in writing for that at this moment. But
I think it's much more complicated than that, because the thing that would naturally come up for Northstar to be self-loathing about is not something that Mantlo can write about in 1986. So I think that even Bill Mantlo looked at Northstar and said, nope, not touching that. We're going to make him fight a crocodile. Alligator.
What? Oh, okay, we'll get to that, I guess.
It's on the cover, my friend.
Exciting.
Yeah, that one's called The One Where Northstar Punches an Alligator.
That's not actually the name of it, is it?
Might as well be, friends.
Getting back to the issue at hand, we cut to the Danger Room control booth where Mr. Madison Jeffries and Roger Box are narration-splaining how they built Heather's battlesuit out of the robotic remains of Delphine Courtney, who had found a way to mimic Guardian's powers. First, Alpha Flight defeated Tundra, then played games on his corpse back in issue 2. Now Heather is literally wearing the corpse of her dead enemy, having taken her power for herself. She's wearing her skin. I mean, not actually her skin.
Like a suit.
Like a suit. This is metal AF. Alpha Flight. Get it?
Yeah. Everyone gets it, Tom. Alpha's Danger Room is built for Mr. Jeffries to use his transmutation of metal powers to manipulate the room and put the team through its paces. He does so, and Heather passes her trial by fire, but in the process, breaks her glasses. There's also a bunch of stuff about Puck always being there to catch her. It's really heavy-handed how Mantlo is pouring fuel onto the fire of Puck's lust.
After the training session, Jeffries and Box present Heather with a pair of modified sunglasses that become the definitive look that separates Heather's Vindicator suit from her husband's. Okay, she also has her long red ponytail sticking out the back, and she is a female wearing a skin-tight suit, so it's not like anyone was going to mistake her for JMH. Honestly, there's a serious lady pool vibe going on from this look, which is interesting.
Actually, yeah, I hadn't really thought about it, but you're right. It really does make you think about Lady Deadpool once you've seen Lady Deadpool.
Yeah.
Huh.
In the interest of tracking odd inconsistencies, here the visor is blue, but on both the cover and the Alpha Waves letter page, last issue, the visor is red.
But with the red on the suit and the orange of her hair, I can see where the blue is a natural choice there instead of the red. It just breaks it up a little bit, adds a little splash. Box is the first member of Alpha Flight to talk to Puck about Puck's obvious care for Heather and asks why Puck doesn't just help her out and give her the training she wants. Puck says, because she's a novice in a profession notably lacking in pity when it comes to apprentices, because I don't wish to see her get hurt, because I do care for her, and because I'm just a lousy little dwarf who lacks the right to tell her so.
It gets worse, listeners.
Box says, you're being awfully hard on yourself, Mr. Judd. I'd like to help you if... And Puck cuts him off with, you help me? What kind of help can a cripple offer a cripple?
Y'all, I almost stopped reading at that point.
It hurts to read. And not just because Puck hates himself or the words that he's using. It's just, this wasn't here 6 issues ago at all. However, they've been through a lot. There's a lot going on. They're all still decompressing from, your basic superhero PTSD. I can see how these changes that Mantlo is writing can be natural outgrowths of character. I just don't think it's being written terribly well. That's all.
I think that is very generous, and we can leave that particular spot there because I have more to say once we get a little bit further into this issue.
Yeah, remember, folks, we've got over 60 issues of Bill Mantlo, so we're trying not to ruin the whole thing here because there's going to be a whole awful lot that happens, and I chose those words very specifically. Shortly after leaving the Danger Room, Puck is once again racked with pain and collapses to the floor. He thinks, it was using Nemesis's sword to kill Deadly Ernest that started it all over again. Good God, why are there two alls? Who wrote this? Bill! I'm sorry, Tom, we gotta bring it back. We gotta. Mantlo! There. Got it out of my system. Sorry, listeners. I didn't want you to have to see me like that. The important part of Puck's quote that I can't quite get through is that he says, still, I promised Guardian I'd never kill again after I was paroled into beta flight.
This was mentioned last issue as well. Apparently, Puck was a bad dude before JMH helped set him straight. This doesn't seem like a bad character development and feels in line with Puck's whole vibe so far. So there you go, Bill. Good for you.
We'll come back to this portion of Puck's life later on. He'll have to go apprehend some of his former companions, and it's kind of fun. It's a one-shot issue. It's just some Puck backstory. I always like Puck backstories.
We're just going to call those pucking around from now on.
Hashtag pucking around. He continues, breaking that promise, even if Ernest deserved death, rocked me. And the way I've been feeling about helping Heather get herself hurt has got me all torn up inside. When I'm confused, I can't focus past the pain. He senses that. After decades of torturing me from within, he sees his chance to get out. I can't take much more of it. But why should I have to? I've suffered enough. It'd be so easy to stop fighting, to let him go. Then I could offer myself to Heather as I was, not half a man anymore. Don't dwarves deserve happiness too? Hold up. If he's half a man now, why is he referring to himself as a dwarf?
This is the part that really sets me off. In creating this character, Byrne established that a dwarf could function as a superhero, that what physical limitations and honestly pain that is discussed by Byrne because of his physical condition, that he could move past it. That's a really incredible and empowering message to have, which is why the self-loathing feels so particularly shitty, quite frankly. But on top of that, and as we're about to dig into in this issue, he's not a fucking dwarf. He is physically altered because of something that was done to him. So for him to continue to insist upon like his being a dwarf and that making him a cripple and all, like the conflation of that is what's really insulting and infuriating about how Mantlo is approaching this. Because the idea of what we're going to get into is actually kind of a neat concept. It's a sort of a neat origin story, but it doesn't work with everything else he's doing, or at the very least, for me, it is incredibly frustrating and incredibly insulting to, real people.
There's a difference between Puck feeling bad about his situation that we'll explain with Razor and Puck calling himself half a man.
Yep.
It seems like every time this cripple word pops up, it has to do with a man feeling less than a full man and feeling as though he cannot be considered a full person because of his physical condition. And that is different than like the motivating stuff that we've seen happening with Puck so far. And it's just unpleasant.
And there is a clear conflation here between being a dwarf and being half a man, half a person.
And being less than.
And being less than.
Not things are harder for me, not I have more difficulties to overcome and I'm tired of having to work twice as hard to get half as much, but just I'm not worth having as much because I am not as much. And that seems really hard baked into Mantlo's conception of these two characters.
Yeah, and it sucks. But as Puck concludes this speech, a dark cloud begins to escape from his body, and he collapses to the floor, no longer racked with pain, it seems.
Scene change to the mansion's roof where Northstar and Aurora are conversing and recapping their part of the story for the readers. A couple of standout points from this. They spend words and page space to tell us about the experiment Walt did to Aurora to change her genetic structure, and they can't touch each other anymore.
Northstar says, Langowski sought to realign your genetic structure to prevent your persecution as a mutant, which is why I had him killed. He doesn't say that last part, but I mean...
Thought bubble. We can all see it. Like there's space for it on the page.
No, the burned version of Northstar would absolutely have thought that. The Mantlo version, I don't even want to consider what he's actually thinking about.
Well, longtime listeners will remember that Tom took this angle as Walt's primary reason for doing this experiment to Aurora, while I argued that Aurora petulantly wanted to separate her powers from her brothers and didn't really care about all that other stuff. It looks like Mantlo is taking Tom's side in this one.
Oh, fuck you, buddy. Do not line me up with Bill. Come on.
When suddenly, Guardian bursts from the door of the roof and takes flight without so much as a word.
When they realize it is Heather in the Guardian suit, Aurora asks, but why is she wearing it? Where is she going? To which Northstar replies, to prove herself worthy of stepping into Guardian's shoes, no doubt. Perhaps she will do something foolhardy. Then Alpha will have to choose a real leader.
Northstar seems quite against the totally human Heather Hudson leading the team, but also doesn't seem to be star-screaming the situation to try to take the job for himself. He's just a smarmy little prat in Matlo's writing, and it kind of works here for him, actually.
Suddenly, a turret blows up, and an immensely black storm cloud erupts from the hole without any heat or noise. Looking down into the ruined elevator shaft, they see a very tall figure slumped on the floor. As they go to help him, a face emerges from the cloud and says,
"Keep away! He is mine! No one will touch the Keeper! I claim Giant Judd as he claimed me, and let all who seek to aid him fear the black blade of Razor.
Okay, couple of things. First of all, Giant Judd is capitalized, both of them. Giant Judd. We never get referred to him as that again. We're not told that like that was his name, his adventuring name back in the day. It's just Razor, Giant Judd. Second point, Razor is spelled R-A-Z-E-R, so it is more one who raises than an item used to shave.
Or specializes in decent mice. Or cell phones.
Oh, I had a razor back in the day. Thank you for that memory. That was a good phone.
Roger Box and Mr. Jeffries are, as per usual, in the basement fiddling with the box armor, this time having given it a slightly different paint scheme, bringing it back to its original coloring of blue and steel with a wide golden girdle around the waist. It also seems to be a bit leaner, not quite the wide hulking monstrosity we saw previously.
We'll talk more coherently about Bogdanov's art at the end. If it weren't for the dialogue, I would have chalked up the box changes to a simple artist change. Everyone is going to be a little bit different with the new artist.
Roger phases into the box with an X armor and flies to the roof just in time to see Razor swinging his giant black sword and cut down Northstar mid-flight. Coming to his aid, Aurora exclaims, "That sword strike left my brother about 6 inches shorter."
Okay, he's laying on the ground. How do you tell that he's 6 inches shorter? Like, how is that your first thing to look for? I'd be looking for blood. I'd be looking for, a gaping hole or something. I wouldn't be assessing what I thought his height was.
But in this world, height really means a lot. So she can already tell he's 6 inches less of a man than he was at the start of the battle.
While Box laments Alpha Flight's current weakness in the magic-wielding department, Razor's blade, that's going to be hard to say. Razor's blade strikes him down with the same shrinking effect it had on Northstar. So 20 seconds into this fight, we've got Puck out on the ground, a short Northstar out, Aurora panicking to help her brother, Heather gone to who knows where, and Box down for the count. It's Deadly Earnest all over again, you know?
By the way, Heather just jetting like that, this is the second time this has happened in Mantlo's run proper. More, she'd only just left when the fucking roof blew off. It's just a Mantlo thread.
That said, I'm going to take a moment here. 6 pages ago, the twins were recapping Walt's experiment and its results for us, and yet Mantlo gives page time in the middle of this fight for Aurora to say,
"Jean-Paul and I used to need to hold hands in order for both of us to emit a blinding, perfect white light." They would describe it as perfect. "Walter's experiment changed that too. I can glow all by myself now, except when I make contact with Northstar. That bitch. I could break away from him, and my light, which seemed to keep Razor at bay, would soon return. But my brother is hurt, unconscious, unable to escape. But I must abandon him to have a fighting chance to save us both."
If we are going to pick new themes for the Mantlo era of Alpha Flight, I think overwrought, repetitive, explanatory dialogue should be one. But we'd black out by the end of an issue. By the end of 3 pages.
Gotta fill those pages, my man. Puck manages to crawl out of the shaft on the roof just as Jeffries arrives from the stairs and says, oh fuck, what's Jeffries' voice? "Puck! Or some basketball player wearing his costume?"
Puck says,
"Nope, I'm gonna do Puck's Giant Judd voice."
Oh God. just nice and deep and resonant. Make him sound like Barry White.
Puck says,
It's me, all right, Mr. Jeffries. Eugene Judd.
Jeffries replies, "But you're not a dwarf anymore. Heck, you're a giant, at least 6'6" and 100 years old." Puck finally stands up and says,
71, Mr. Jeffries.
and he's real tall.
He's still wearing his Puck costume, which, since Mantlo has taken over, is now a wrestler's singlet style with shoulder straps and like brief bottoms instead of the sleeveless version with full pants that he had on last issue and Tom had on at C2E2.
The effect of this particular costume being stretched out into a super tall dude is striking. It wouldn't be nearly as silly or as impactful if he were just wearing pants.
This costume doesn't let Puck wear his headgear this issue, and I knew that we should have made that for you for C2E2. It should have been the wrestling singlet and no headgear because you really hid behind that headgear.
Listeners, when we were trying to figure out our costumes, our get up for C2E2, an initial choice was a long singlet. It is basically like a dancer singlet, but it was really tight on both Chris and me. Like
in the shoulders.
In the shoulders. But it was really tight, especially in the shoulders. But now that I'm thinking about it, that's absolutely what Chris should have worn as Giant Judd all through C2E2. But it would have been a miserable experience for him. And frankly, may not have netted us quite as many good posts for the socials.
That costume would not have been any worse than the guy I saw dressed as Psylocke.
He looked fantastic.
He did. He really rocked it. But there's a reason I only posted the picture I took from the back, because the front one was something. Jeffries asks for the Reader's Digest version of what's going on. So here it is. The Tale of Tall Puck. A tall tale, if you will.
Boo!
Okay, that's the episode title now.
Boo! Anyway, Eugene Judd tells Jeffries that he is 71 years old and was born in 1914 because Jeffries can't do math. The spirit cloud with a sword is named Razor with an E or maybe an O. It is spelled differently in 2 adjacent panels.
Rick Parker wouldn't have made a mistake like that.
You hear that, Jim Novak?
You bum! In 1939, Judd had already established himself as a competent and effective soldier of fortune. An antiquities dealer hired him to steal a mystical artifact named the Black Blade of Baghdad.
Absolutely what Eric Prince uses as his gamer tag and insists his friends call him.
Actually, I just read something about Eric Prince, and apparently he insists that people call him Echo Papa, and I'm not making this up.
Why are the biggest fucking dorks in such control of our...
So I'm thinking that in 1939, if Judd is a guy who's going out and stealing antiquities, you know what we need to see? We need to see Giant Judd versus Indiana Jones.
I mean, I think Indy just absolutely houses him.
I think it would be a very fun thing. So if there is someone out there who is an aspiring filmmaker who needs an idea, I want to see Giant Judd versus Indiana Jones. There you go. It'll be fun. The Black Blade of Baghdad was said to contain the spirit of a renegade sorcerer imprisoned by the spells of Persian mystics inside a shining white scimitar, which apparently turned black by the sorcerer's evil. Judd had skirted mystical paths before and jumped at the chance because he was curious and he likes to satisfy his curiosity.
It makes me nervous when you say things like that with that kind of tone.
Oh, Puck knows.
He breaks into a very Iraq in 1939 mansion, slips past the guards, and finds the blade. He says,
I knew the moment I set eyes on it that this was one treasure I wouldn't offer for resale, for the blade seemed to respond to dishonest thoughts as well as my touch. As if sensing a kindred spirit, a sinister scream sang along its ebony steel, and something strange sprang free from the sword.
Razor walks the earth again!
Well, he's a cloud, so I guess he floats the earth again.
Razor comes out swinging his scimitar at Judd, who evades just like Puck would with wild cartwheels and acrobatics. Coming from a dude Judd's size, those moves pack a lot of power.
Soon, Razor's oversized scimitar connects, and Judd is shocked to find he doesn't die. He says, I'm shorter by about 6 inches. Razor's blade stole some of my life force, and with its loss, I've been reduced in size.
Okay, look, life force is a loose concept to begin with, but I'm pretty sure losing some doesn't make you shorter. I mean, Wesley in the Princess Bride didn't get shorter when the six-fingered man took his life force away. But apparently to Mantlo, the size of a person measures their life force and the amount of life and value they have. Like, I think we've just cracked this code right here. If you're less, you're smaller. I wonder how tall Bill Mantlo was. I wonder if he's a small guy.
Puck continues,
Now I understand the legends. Why your fellow sorcerers sought to contain you. You'd make men small, shrivel, and steal their souls, and reduce them to nothingness to make your own power grow.
Puck draws on his mystical knowledge and figures out Razor was able to corrupt the prison of the Black Blade because the blade couldn't fight back.
But a living vessel might sacrifice itself to do the task of senseless steel. Stealing souls can be a two-way street, sorcerer. You want mine? Take it, but the price to be paid is that I will be your prison instead of the sword.
Judd pulls the cloud of Razor into his body, and the page ends with a great panel of Puck as we know him, casting a shadow behind him the size he used to be.
Which is really cool.
Yeah.
And again, there are elements of this that are they're neat. It's giving an interesting dimension to Puck. We talked last issue about kind of blowing up the mystery box, and this does to a degree, but it still leaves room for other adventures, other things to take place.
Giant Judd versus Indiana Jones. Yeah.
For instance, like or when he's referenced things in the past, was it when he was Giant Judd or when he was in the form we know as Puck? That's still there. Again, it's the context that's really souring me on this. But back to the issue. In the present, Tall Puck sees that Razor shies away from Aurora's light.
I never fully realized it, but that's how I managed to contain Razor years ago. It was the light of my spirit that defeated his darkness.
So he wakes up Northstar and tells him to spin around Razor and contain his cloud.
As Northstar and Aurora keep Razor busy, Puck dives into the cloud and grabs Razor's blade and thrusts it into his own skull.
Narration boxes close out the action and the book here. The black blade seems to split Puck's skull, letting the light of his spirit, the strength of his soul, stream forth and ensnare the writhing Razor. At the same time, Puck releases the life forces stolen from Box and Northstar. Each is instantly restored to his normal height and strength. There is a trade-off, a price. Some of Puck's soul is lost in the process, and as a result, he shrinks again in size.
God, just screaming about this, Tom. Your size doesn't reflect your soul, Bill. Come on, Bill.
But into that mystically manifested wound, the screaming sorcerer is drawn back into imprisonment, where he will be contained so long as a tormented little man lives out his eldritch and extended life.
And it ends right there. It's a real abrupt ending. There's no fallout. They just pick up right up with the next adventure, in the next issue. That's a thing that happens. So one of the things that gets glossed over a bit is how old Puck is, because he looks like a dude who's maybe, 35, 38, I'm going to guess. We'll give him 45 on the outside. But if he's 71, he doesn't look 71 at all, except when he's Tall Puck. And then he does look older. He's got a full white beard and all that stuff. So with Razor extending his life, does that count as a superpower? Because it's mystically enhanced life and presumably some form of vitality. Instead of being a dwarf, now he actually has superpowers. Even if they're not powers that are used for necessarily offense or defense, but unnaturally long life, I think that counts as a superpower, and we might have to change our standard description of Puck now, because he's not a dwarf.
I think that's a fair assessment. I mean, having a passive ability counts just as much as an active one.
I mean, look at Cypher.
I remember an issue of X-Men where they're all playing basketball. It's probably the relaunch, number 2 or something like that. And
it's more where Rogue and Gambit go on a date, I think. No,
they don't go on a date, but they get into a fight.
Yeah,
because
right.
midway through the game, Rogue flies up to grab the ball, and everyone complains that you're not supposed to use powers. And she points out that Gambit has a natural charm effect. That's actually
agility,
one of his
I believe. Yeah,
well, agility, but also charm, and the charm allows him to be more deceptive. All these things, and so fine,
well, okay,
fine,
we'll take
fine.
it back even further. In the original conception of the mutants, when Stan Lee was writing them, the baseline description of mutants were that they all had an almost Captain America-like notch above regular humans. An old school Captain America notch above humans, not modern God Captain America notch above, All mutants had that baseline agility charm, I guess, that just being better at everything. They were healthier, stronger, heal faster, hit harder, everything. But that kind of got washed away.
I'm not against that being washed away for any number of reasons, narrative stakes, all that, but also because that isn't necessarily what evolution is. Evolution is adaptation over time. It's not necessarily going to
making
some sort
it
of
better.
Yeah, it's not towards some end goal. It's not
teleology. Can we talk about Aristotle, Tom?
No. No. Although we could talk about Aquinas and how he thought that if you lose parts of your body, that makes you less of a person. So maybe that's what Mantlo is pulling from.
One thing we said earlier we would circle back to is the art. So we don't have Mike Mignola here. We have perennial fill-in artist John Bogdanoff, and this art looks incredibly 1986. It is not the best, is what I'll say. Everybody looks about right, but it feels faster done. It feels more like the Marvel 2-in-1 art, where you need this thing to be drawn and it needs to be done, so you grab a guy and he can turn it out for you. It must be his art because we got the same inker, but the ink lines feel different and rougher, and everything about it just feels like it was done quickly.
It feels hurried, but on top of that, the panel sequencing feels really odd at times, like especially in the fight. I mean, we are more understanding the fight by the narration, both by the characters and the narration boxes, than we are by what's happening visually on the page.
Yeah, the visuals were, other than Tall Puck and Heather in the costume, the visuals of this issue were utterly secondary.
Although I do think the Danger Room scene where Heather turns off the suit's power in order to avoid some missiles that were tracking it, that was a very clever movement on Heather's part. Like, that was just good, quick thinking, quicker than trying to disconnect your power battery in 10 seconds.
No, to rewire your power pack so that it will cut a hole in space-time and launch you back 10,000 years. Or 4,000 years.
No, it's 10,000.
Oh, no, because they were like Egyptians when they viewed it on Earth.
You know what? Why are we quibbling about this? It was a bullshit story and a bullshit story.
Hey, Tom.
Anyway.
Tom.
I don't want to know. However, the other point I was going to make is that actually was communicated, I thought, well on the page, but it was probably the panel that did the best job throughout here. Again, other than the image of Puck with the giant Judd shadow behind him and the image of giant Judd himself.
When Puck is Puck himself, his face looks wrong. He doesn't have the same kind of broad smile that Byrne would give him. I don't think we've seen Puck smile once, and that was a big deal about how Puck was introduced to us by Byrne.
And it's interesting because part of your voice that you do for Puck, there's
a grin to it.
There's a grin. I mean, there's a little bit of a leer to it, but there is a grin and a charm to that Puck. And Puck is charmless. Like he's spending too much time wallowing in order to express anything like that. And the art kinda gets that across in a way that I don't think was necessarily intended, but definitely happened.
Ever since Mantlo took over, we haven't had an old man Puck story about some adventure that I was doing that certainly sounds fancy. And that was a big part of him. And for Mantlo to go back to the very early parts of Alpha Flight and use those as a Bible to build from, it's just so weird to see which pieces got left behind in favor of the pieces that he picked up. Because this facet of Puck's character has been absolutely central to him as a character moving forward. So it's not just that this does a weird thing with Puck's characterization and his backstory. It's that this story is stripping out a lot of the stuff that made Puck a very cool character in order to tell a story that just isn't that great.
It's also screwing the team dynamics. Like all of them had their personality that you understood as an element of Alpha Flight and why they functioned the way they did, and that's gone. And instead of giving us an old man's story, he gives us an old man's story.
Oh, excellent description.
Crushed it. One more point before we start to really wrap up. I find it incredibly odd they are still referring to Madison as Mr. Jeffries. Like, I guess Box doing it a little bit makes sense because that's how he seems to refer to everyone for the most part. But everyone else calls him Mr. Jeffries. And even the narration says Mr. Jeffries. It's weird, man. I don't know if is Madison a big reveal? I don't know, but like...
It's been revealed. Everybody knows it. Heather typed it into the goddamn computer. Alphanex.
It's weird. I don't get it. But anyway, maybe that's just my hang up, but it reads really odd on the page to me.
And I view it as coupled with how Box refers to everyone around him as Mr. or Mrs. or whatever. But it seems as though Box has stopped that in the last couple of issues. That now that he's on the team proper, it seems like he's getting a bit more comfortable with his teammates and calling them by their code names instead of being the respectful little boy who doesn't want people to think of him as less than. So he's very polite. And I think that shows a good bit of character growth for Roger.
Hey, a positive.
We're ending on a high note here, folks.
Well, a C+ note.
I don't know enough about formal music theory.
Oh, I'm just talking grading. Like I'm putting it at like a solid 79%, not 100.
I'd give it a 77. Not close enough to have hope, but not down enough that you feel bad about yourself. But yeah, we're not going to get in the habit of grading all of these because, friends, I don't want to be in that headspace. Why Not Read Alpha Flight is brought to you by the Excelsior Embroidery Company, specializing in comic-themed patches, towels, and more. This week, we are featuring our delightfully cheeky Rogue towels, now 100% lead-free in the state of California. See what everyone at C2E2 was talking about by going to ExcelsierEmbroidery.etsy.com. When company is coming over, bring out the good towels. Excelsior.
Why Not is recorded in Chicago, Illinois, and deep beneath stately Baker Manor in a fashionable neighborhood outside St. Louis. It is written by Chris Baker and edited by Tom Flynn. New episodes are available every other Monday at www.thewhynotpod.com and on most podcast platforms. You can email us at whynotapod@gmail.com. That's whynotehpod@gmail.com, or find us online on Blue Sky and Instagram. Please take a moment to rate and review us on whatever platform you're listening on, and take a moment to mention the show to that special someone in your life who likes Alpha Flight.
Join us next time when we get a guest appearance from the X-Men and the first appearance of longtime Wolverine antagonist Lady Deathstrike. Catch you on the flip side.